Good morning. So today's daf is Batra daf chet. We're actually already on daf chet at the top of daf chet, third line. Let me share my screen and we'll get really started. So where are we? So what have we been doing recently? So at the conclusion of our learning yesterday, we saw that Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan both felt that rabbis should be exempt from contributing to the tax for building a protective wall around the city. And they felt that way because rabbis are already protected by their Torah learning. So we're going to pick up with the third line, and the Gemara considers whether the rabbis should be exempt from general taxes. And we'll see shortly what kind of taxes we're talking about, or what kind of taxes we're not talking about. It'll be a little bit clearer as we go through today. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda, Rama Karga Arabanan. So again, third line, fourth word from the end of the line is Rav Nachman. And so Rav Nachman put a head tax, a karga is a head tax, on the rabbis. Now, we'll see from what follows that it appears to be a general tax not tied to any particular purpose, because we'll see that taxes that are tied to a particular purpose, as long as the purpose is not protection, then rabbis would be required in it. So let's take a look and see what the story is. So Rav Nachman, so now that was Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda, and now Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak responds, and he says, Amrle Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Avart ada oraisa va'ad nevi'i va'ad kesuve. Welcome, Mark. You have violated the Torah, you violated the prophets, and you violated the ksuvim, the writings. So that's that's a big problem. So how do I know that you violated all these things? So Rav Nachman gives him the sources. Ada oraisa, you violated the Torah, diksiv, av chovev amim, kol kedoshav biadecha, and the pasuk finishes. Behem tu kula raglecha yisa midabarosecha. So that's the pasuk. The pasuk means even as God loves the people, all the nations, all his holy ones, all of God's holy ones, they're in God's hands. And the verse concludes, they sit at your feet, receiving your words. So that's the pasuk. So how in the world does that tell us that you can't put a general tax on rabbis? Because Amar Moshe lived there. Kadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe was telling God, right? This pasuk is in Sefer Dvarim, Parak Lamed Gimel Pasuk Gimel. So basically very close to the end of the Torah. So Moshe was telling God, Ribono Shalom, God, afilu b'shah she'ata mechabev amim, even when you cherish other people, other nations, kol kedushav you biyadecha. All of the holy people, all of the righteous, the rabbis, should be in your hand. And Rashi explains, sha'atam, if we go back to the last word in the second line of Rashi, sha'ata mechabev amim, that you are, when you cherish other people, sha'ata matzhiv lahem panecha, you shine your face on them, lahashlitan al banecha, to rule over your children. Meaning that when God shines God's face on someone, that's showing favoritism. When God shows favoritism towards the other nations, because by allowing them to rule over the Jewish people, well then, Kol Kedoshav Yeyu Biadecha, continuing Rashi, Kol Kedoshav Shel Yisrael, all of the holy ones of Israel, Biadechahem L'Shomran, they are in your hand to watch over them. So it is your job, God, to watch over the righteous, namely those who are rabbis. And so as a result, this verse shows that you, God, are going to watch over them. Therefore, unless the tax is for something where God has not promised protection for the righteous, so then you shouldn't have an obligation to pay it.
Wow.
All right. And the pasuk again continues. So again, vehem tukula raglecha, and they're going to sit at your feet. Tana Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef taught elu talmidei chachamim. So now we're clarifying who are the holy ones. These are the talmidei chachamim. These are the rabbis. Shemekatasim raglehem mi'ir le'ir umemedina lemedina lomo Torah, because they mechatasim literally means to pound. They pound their feet from city to city and from state to state in order to study Torah. Yisami dabrosecha, the receiving words, God's words. Lisav litain b'durosav shel makom, in order to have a back and forth, to buy and sell. Lisav is also used to sort of as in connection to do business with. But the idea here is to discuss the words of Hashem. So that's so that we see that the ones that are considered the righteous ones, that are referred to, the holy ones, the Kedoshav, that is referring to the rabbis. So that's how we see the violation of the Torah verse. Adneviye, how do I know that you also transgressed Nevi'im? Diksiv, Gam ki yitnu vagoyim ata akabseim, v'yachalu me'at mimasa melech sarim. So even when they ingratiate themselves with the nations, I will gather them now, and they will be somewhat humbled by the burdens of kings and officers. So what is that? What is that referring to? Let's clarify. So Amar Ula explains what this is talking about. Pasuk zeh b'lashon Aramis nemar. This pasuk should be interpreted not as Hebrew, which is how we just translated, but we should interpret it as Aramaic. And itanu kulu, and so now itanu doesn't mean to sort of ingratiate, but rather it's tanu, as in like tanu rabbanan, the rabbis learned. So when all of the Jews are studying Torah, then atah kabseim, then immediately God will gather them up and end our exile. So God willing, that should happen very soon, because probably more Jews are learning Torah today than ever before. So hopefully we're getting close to getting to hitting the threshold that we need to hit in order to make this happen. So but if only a little bit of them are, now we're again interpreting the verse, if only a little bit of them are learning, meaning fewer than half. So yachelu mimasa melech misarim. At least we will release, we will free from the burdens of the kings and the princes. We'll free them from those burdens. And so, of course, what burden are we talking about? Taxes. So there we go. So again, if you want a Gemara that shows that the government, exactly, that the taxes are the bane of all time, so that this is a good Gemara for that. And what about the violation of the Ketubim? So Dixim, because we got an even more explicit pasuk in Ezra. Minda v'lo v'halach lo shalit lemirma aleihem. This is, so what is this? Let's give some context. This is the statement of King Daryavish that he set up, saying in sending Ezra to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, and he said that it's going to be unlawful to impose upon them levies, taxes, and tithes. So V'amar Rav Yehuda, Minda Zominas Hamelech. Minda is the king's portion of the taxes. Below, so Kesef Gulgalta. The below is the head tax. V'halach Zo Arnona. That's the tithes. That's the income tax, so to speak. So again, we have all three sources make clear that Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda should not have imposed taxes on the rabbis. Rav Papa Rama Karya Chadta. Rav Papa imposed a tax on digging a new well, ayasme. Now, this will eventually come back to the rabbis, but we're going to talk about Yisomim as well, because similar to how we're not. Oh, and let's go back to. I didn't do the Rashi on Yavish, so let's go back on that. So Mindo Balu Vahalach. So 1 second. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Daryavish Siva es Pachas of our Nahar. That he Daryavish, who of course was a king of Persia, and the son of Esther and Achashverosh, according to rabbinic tradition. So he commanded the treasurers, the people who are going to collect the tax in Aver Anar. Now, Aver Anar here, often Aver Anar means the land of Israel because, or the other side of the Jordan, but here it's actually referring to the other side of the Euphrates, from the seed of the seat of Persia, al anshe Knesset Hagadola, that they basically was saying that you're not allowed to collect from the right, from the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the men of the assembly, the great assembly, that they cannot be taxed. And that is highlighting that it's the rabbis specifically that cannot be taxed. So, okay, so that's, just again, an interesting historical point from Ezra. But the point is that we're learning from this pasuk more broadly that in general, rabbis can't be taxed on broad level taxes. So Rav Papa Rama Karya Chadta. So again, Rav Papa, though, imposed a tax, ayasme, on orphans. Amrlei Rav Shisha, Brei the Rav Idi, the Rav Papa, the Dilma Lo Midville. 1 second, maybe that new well won't ever be drawn from because it will be a dry well. And as a result, you won't have accomplished anything. And you'll be taking money from orphans for no purpose. Now, the assumption here is that you would be allowed to take from the orphans if the well was productive, because if the well was productive, you are providing a good for the orphans. So Amrle, Mishkal Shakina Minayu, E Midvel, Elo, Mahadrana La Nehal Layu. And so he basically, Rav Papa said, listen, I'm going to collect the tax now. If we get the water and we can draw the water, great, we'll draw water and there's no problem. And if not, I'll return the money. So as a result, that's how I have a basis to collect the tax. Rav Yehuda Hakol Le'igle Gapa. Everybody has to pay for the doors to enclose the city. Afilu miyasbe, even orphans. Aval rabbanan lo tzrikin into rusa. But the rabbis don't need protection, so they don't need to pay. Hakol karya pasya. Everybody has to be collected from when it comes to digging a well. And here we get to the point. Afilu mirabanan. Even the rabbis, meaning even the rabbis need to drink water, and so as a result, while they are protected from protection, we are not going to say that they're exempt from other services. So if you have a bridge or a road or any of the numerous other wonderful goods that are provided by the government, then rabbis also are subject to those taxes as well. The low amran however, when we say that they don't have to, that they're obligated to pay the tax, that's only when the tax does not involve calling them to do the digging. If they actually have to do the digging of the well, well, that would be bad. We don't want them. Aval navki ba'achaluza. If they are called out to do the work themselves, rabbanan lav b'nei meipak ba'achaluza ninu. They are not people who get called out to do work. So as a result, that's been clarified for us. Okay, so now that we've got all that detail, so now we have a story of favoritism to rabbis shown by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Okay, so
there's some parallels today between what's going on in Israel with
yes, oh, absolutely, 100%. Correct. That's exactly right. So it's and this is the Gemara. You're absolutely right. Fabulous point that this has a true Daf Yomi coincidence of right now we're having the conversation. The conversation in Israel is what is the obligation of the Haredim to provide
Service.
services, and do they have to defend? And so, and indeed, when Ben Gurion agreed to the terms of the thing, that it was a very small percentage, and it was true rabbis,
Now,
I
and
think it was 400.
and so as a result, there's a logic to saying, well, they don't need to defend because their learning is providing a defense in and of itself. But now the question is are all the people who are taking advantage of the learning, are they actually doing the learning, etc.? That becomes a more difficult situation. Charlie, you
And
want?
then the issue of the orphans not paying. This is more general than just rabbis not paying. Uh, I mean, we give tax benefits or even free things to people who don't really need them. And just to give you an example, I have a card that lets me ride the Philadelphia transit system for free.
Because
I'm a senior citizen,
okay.
and I do not pay taxes to Philadelphia or Pennsylvania.
Wow. Interesting. All right. So that's yes. So maybe you should, but okay. All
Yeah,
right.
maybe I
So
should. Yeah.
so all right. So now we're going to get a story of Rebbe. Let's take a look. So Rebbe Pasach Otza Ros Bishnei Batzores. So when there was famine, in the years of famine, Rebbe would open his storehouses. So Amar Yikanzu Bale Mikra, those who read Torah, Bale Mishnah, those who are knowledgeable in the Mishnah, Bale Gemara, those who learn Gemara, Bale Halacha, those who learn Halacha, Bale Haggadah, those who learn Agadic teachings. So all of those people are welcome to take food because we're in years of famine, so they could use a little bit of assistance. Aval ame haaretz al yikansu. But if you are not learned, if you don't do any learning, then don't enter. Dachak Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram benichtas. Now, Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram, who we will see shortly, is a student of Rebbe's. He pushed his way in and got into the storehouse. Now, clearly, we'll see also from the story that Rebbe doesn't recognize him. So clearly he disguised himself. So those two facts are important to note because Amar Lo Rebbe said, I'm sorry. So Amar Lo, he said to Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram, said to Rebbe Parnaseni, my master, please feed me. So Amar Lo B'nei Karisa. So Rebbe says back to him, my son, do you read? Meaning, have you studied a mikra? Have you studied the Torah? Amar Lo Lav. He says, no. Shanisa, have you studied any Mishnah? Amar Le Lav. He said to him, no. Im Kain, Bama Afarnescha. How am I supposed to give you any food? This food is for the rabbis. So Amar Le Parnaseni Kichelev Ucha Orav. You should feed me like a dog or a raven. So what is that referencing? So Rashi helps us out here. So we are basically smack in the middle of the narrow lines of Rashi. It's right after where it says Gilyon Ashas on the right-hand side of the page, right after the bottom of that, or right next to the bottom of that. The Hashem had mercy on them, had concern for them, on these animals. Shenemar, as we see in Mishlei, Tzaddik Yodea Tzaddik Din Dalim. That in Mishlei it says that the righteous knows the judgment of those who are poor. What, and that's referring to Lefisha HaKelev Mizonosav Mu'atin. The dogs don't have an opportunity, especially wild dogs, don't have the opportunity to eat very much. Lefikach Shoa Achilaso B'meyav Shloshes Yamim. As a result, their what they eat is digested over the part of 3 days. So that way they continue to feel full and are sustained by a very small amount. Begabi Orev, and when it comes to an Orev, Ksiv, it says, Livanai Orev Asher Yikra'u, to my children, the Orev that uh, that I'm to who I'm calling, and that refers to, this is referring to a Gemara, I think from Masechah Shabbos, but maybe I think we may have seen it elsewhere, that the Orev Lefisha Orev Achzari al Banav, that an Orev is cruel to its children, because we saw that the color, an Orev of course is black, but the children could be white, and as a result, they aren't acknowledged by their parents. The Hakadosh Baruch Hu mizamin lehen yutushin, but nonetheless, God has found a way to sustain them because He prepares worms for them, mitoch tzoasam va'ochlin. That somehow these worms are very attracted to the excrement of these animals, and so as a result, their own excrement ends up bringing the worms to them, and so as a result, they have something to eat. So as a result, even though they're not fed by their parents, they God sustains them. So the point is Rabbi Yonasan is saying, listen, you may not want to sustain me, but you should at least sustain me the way Hashem sustains a dog or a raven. So Parnasei, so Rebbe actually gave him food. So Basar de Nafak, but after Rabbi Yonatan left, Yosef Rebbe become Mitzvah. Rebbe was sitting and he became pained by and felt distressed about what had happened. Va'amar oili shenasati piti la'am haaretz. I feel bad that I gave bread to an unlearned person. So Amar lafanav Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe. So Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe says to Rebbe, Shema Yonatan ben Amram talmidechahu. Maybe this guy was actually your student, Yonatan ben Amram, who, she'enu rotza lihanos mikvod Torah miyavav, who has tried very hard not to ever benefit from the honor associated with the Torah. Meaning that often we honor the people who have learned Torah, but the truth is that honor doesn't belong to those people. It belongs to the Torah that they've learned. And so as a result, a righteous way of acting is to acknowledge and to try not to benefit from that honor. Badku v'ashkach. And so they investigated and they found that in fact it was Rabbi Yonatan. So as a result, of course, Rabbi felt better about having given bread to him, but as a result, Amar Rebbe yikansu hakol. So now we got to let everybody come in, because the bottom line is he's worried that maybe there's going to be somebody who won't hide himself, who won't try to get assistance, but they and as a result won't end up getting any food, even though they're precisely the people that Rebbe wants to feed. In the end, Rebbe's method was undermining his goal. His goal was that the righteous scholars should be able to get fed, but if the righteous don't want to take advantage of their righteousness, well, then that undermines the process. Okay, so Rebbe l'taimei, and yet at the same time, Rebbe's opinion, Rebbe's actions were following his opinion. To Amar Rebbe, ein puranus bala olam ela b'shvil amei haaretz, that any kind of misfortune will only come to the world because people aren't learning Torah. So, and let's give an example. Kiahu demei kalila deshadu ataveria. Like, listen to this story where we had a tax imposed on Taveria. Also, the Rebbe, and all the people came in front of Rebbe. V'amrulei leisu rabbanan bahadan. The rabbi should pay this tax with the rest of us. Amrlahu lo. And Rebbe said, no, we're not. Amrulei arukinan. We're going to run away. So Amrlahu aroku. Go ahead and run away. Arku palgehen. So half of them ran away. Dalyua palga. So as a result, the king eliminated half of the tax. So as a result, now asu hanu palgad kamei the Rebbe. So the rest, the other half, now comes in front of Rebbe. Amrulei lisvu rabbanan bahadan let the rabbis contribute with us. Amar lahu lo. And he said, no, and we're not going to. Arukina, we're going to run away. Aroku, go ahead and run away. Arkuchulu, now everybody ran away. Pashahu koves, with one exception of one launderer, one laundry guy, he remained in town. Shadua akoves, and the tax was put on this one laundry guy. Arakovis. So, of course, what did the laundry guy do? He also ran away because he didn't want to pay the tax. And you know what happened? Even though now the only people living in Tiberia were the rabbis, Paka Kalila. The entire tax was eliminated. So, Amar Rebbe, so Rebbe says, Re'izem she'ein puranos bala olam ela b'shvil ami. So you can see this is a very clear example that the bad things only come because of Amayaretz. Meaning, once the city had no Amayaretz, the Hashem was like, indirectly, obviously, Hashem was like, okay, you don't need to have a tax on it. And so, as a result, there was no tax.
It's a little bit odd here that where the Gemara says before that half the people ran away, so the governors eliminated half the tax. But when there was one person remaining, they imposed the entire tax on that person. So as if reinstituted the whole tax, half the tax that they had eliminated.
Correct. That is that inconsistency between the fact that they eliminated half the tax when half the people ran away, and they didn't eliminate essentially 99% of the tax when the rest of the people ran away, is something that is discussed in Rishonim, but it's beyond the scope of our discussion today. But there are, you can certainly try and take various kinds of lessons from that. It's sort of like if the most obvious one to me is a sort of fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. That they were the government was like, you're trying to get away. But the interesting thing is, of course, that in the end, when it was only on the rabbis, the tax was completely eliminated. And so the question is, one possible way to understand that is to understand that when you are dealing with truly great rabbis, so people recognize their holiness and their greatness, etc. Even people who are not Jewish. And so as a result, that could be the basis that they realize that we're not interested, that in fact the government, the local government, understood the point that Rebbe was making, that look, if you're providing a societal benefit by helping people and doing the righteous deeds, so then we recognize the good that provides to the entire community, and so as a result you're not going to be taxed. But if you're not doing that, if you're in it for yourself and you're trying to make a buck, so then those are the people that we're going to tax. Okay, there's just at least a thought. So we
Additionally,
yep,
the clergy, whether they're Jewish or non-Jewish, their homes are tax exempt.
Yes, well, that's not quite an accurate statement if you mean like in modern day, but you're correct that income provided to provide housing to clergy of churches and synagogues, etc., can be tax exempt. But
that situation in New York, for
yes.
example, Columbia University owns vast swaths of property up and down the west side of Manhattan.
Right, and because they're a tax exempt organization, so that's exactly
right.
Right.
They have an endowment
Correct.
of
that absolutely right, and of course the Catholic Church has the similar thing. So, but I will note that all of that, I'm sure that there are probably earlier sources. My guess is that it wouldn't surprise me if the Hammurabi Code or something like that would also have it. But of course, one of the earliest sources for that concept is our Torah, because Yosef in Mitzrayim does not tax the Kohanim of the priests of Mitzrayim. So we see that that's a concept that is a very, very ancient idea, and it could be that that is being recognized here as well. So you should
that decree of Yosef continued for a millennium, and it was one of the reasons why the populace of Egypt was absolutely crushed by oppressive taxes, because so many, and this became an issue in Christian Europe and Christian Middle East and in Islamic countries as well, because there was a blanket tax exemption for anything religious, and so much property was given to the religious groups that everybody else was absolutely oppressed by high taxation.
Yep. So it highlights that we have to that there needs to be a check on the system. But okay, so we now return back to our Mishnah, and our Mishnah asked the question of how long does somebody need to be there in order to be taxed? How long do you need to be in the city in order to be like the people of the city? And we answer that it takes 12 months. So let's take a look. So Uraminhu, you're telling me that it takes 12 months? What about the following? We got a brisa that shows that it doesn't. Hachameres v'hagameles v'haoveres mimakom l'makom. If you got somebody, traveling on a donkey or a camel that's going from place to place, v'lana besocha, and they take lodging in a city, v'hudchan imahen, and you know what? Unfortunately, he is seduced by idolatry, and he does idolatry with the people in that city. Now, the rule is that if an entire city engages in idolatry, the entire city is destroyed. The people of the city are killed with the sword. That's the punishment. And all of their possessions are also destroyed. Now, what about this guy who happens to be traveling through and he gets caught up with them? Is he treated exactly like them? So this is where we pick up with the Sprisa. Hain Beskila, the people who are traveling are not killed with the sword. They're killed by stoning. Umamonam palat, and their property escapes. So as a result, they are not subject to the penalty. V'im nishtahu sham shloshim yom. However, if they stay there for 30 days, hain b'sayif umamonam avad, then they are killed with the sword and their possessions are destroyed. So, hey, doesn't that show that 30 days is sufficient to be considered a resident of a place? So Amarava Lokashya halivnei masa haliyusuve masa, to be a child of the city, meaning a citizen, to be a full-fledged party of the city, that takes 12 months. But when it comes to just being a resident, that takes only 30 days. At Keditanya, because we have a similar brisa. Hamudar hana anshe. If you say, I am refusing to have benefit from the people of this particular city, kol nishtaha sham shnei masar chodesh, anybody who's lived there for 12 months, you can't benefit from them. So we see that in order to be a true member of the city, that takes 12 months. However, pachas mikan mutter, if they're less than 12 months, you would be allowed to benefit from them. But if instead of saying mi b'nei ha'ir, you say mi yoshvei ha'ir, or instead of saying mi anshei ha'ir, from the people of the city, you say mi yoshvei ha'ir, from those who are residents, well, then kol nishtaha sham shloshim yom. Then the people only have to have been there 30 days. In order for you to be prohibited to benefit from them. But if they were there for less than 30 days, you'd be allowed to benefit from them. So we see this distinction between a citizen and a resident. A citizen requires 12 months, a resident only 30 days. Well, 1 second. All right, so you've explained that in order to be a true citizen, it takes 12 months. But we see that there are other things that you do not have to take 12 months, because Vatanya, Shloshim yom latamchui. Once you've been in a city for 30 days, you need to support the tamchui. That's the food pantry. Shlosha chadashim lekupa. 3 months is sufficient for you to support the box. And that, but by kupa, we mean the charity box. That's the money that is used to give money to poor people. Shisha l'chsus, 6 months, and then you contribute to the clothing for the poor people in the city. Tisha l'kvura, 9 months to contributing towards the burial of the poor people in the city. And shnei masar l'fasei and then 12 months for the boards of the city. And the boards of the city, if we take a look, no, we are right. There isn't Rashi on that. So, and the boards of the city, that's to fortify the city. So we see that there are other expenses that need to be paid even before the 12 months have elapsed. So Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ki Tanan Nami Masnisin Shnei Masar Chodesh Lefasei Ha'ir Tanan. That the point is that when we were teaching our Mishnah and it said that you needed to be there for 12 months, we were talking about the boards of to fortify the gates of the city, and that's what you need to wait. Okay.
There's a similar discussion in the 8th chapter of Yerushalmi Peah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mention any exemptions.
Interesting. Doesn't refer to the rabbis being exempt.
Nope.
Interesting. One can imagine that this is in some ways a response to that by recognizing that the need for rabbis and the different situation that we had in Israel versus you can come up with a couple different approaches. One is maybe there are more holy people in Israel, so therefore we couldn't afford it, or that there was a stronger demand or a stronger need that the rabbis felt for rabbis in Bavel. But that it's an interesting point to raise that concept doesn't flow through from Yerushalmi. Okay.
Well, they have a little different take on it. Rabbi Yochanan is one of the disputants there, but they seem to conclude that rather than being exempt from taxes, they are paid by the city.
Interesting.
They are actually involved in teaching.
Interesting. So effectively, one can understand, it as, is it, are they following the European model where we don't have separation of church and state? And so as a result, the state itself is providing some of the funds to support them. And then they in turn have to support that state, which is supporting them, in which case that also would help us understand it, because just as they now no longer are they simply putting money in for the defense, they're putting money in order for themselves to get paid. And of course, if they're getting paid, so then that's something that they would be obligated, just as they're obligated in support of water. Whereas the Bavel approach is sort of the U.S.
Right.
Separation of church and state, where instead of providing any direct support, the support is all provided through tax exemption rather than direct support. Okay,
Interesting. You mentioned the
European
model. Even militantly secular France pays the cost of Jewish school, at least the secular education, in any Jewish school that is willing to accept it.
Wow. All right. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So I was just going to scroll because I see that I didn't scroll. So, now we made one statement by Rabbi Asi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're going to cite again Rabbi Asi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan for the point that we saw earlier. So,
isn't there a difficulty here in using the various definitions here to define to describe what one benefits or what for 30 days, 3 months, 6 months, so forth, versus the earlier discussion regarding Avodah Zarah, and why we learn, but one is a complete negative. I don't know that they bring this as a machloket Tanaim or from a Tanaim. But we're talking about positive aspects here. But before, it could be completely different for someone who does avodah zarah.
100%.
That brings a negative aspect to the city. This person creates a negative influence versus the positive influence. They seem to be diametrically opposed.
Yeah,
This is a raya for avodah zarah.
Yeah, well, so a couple of different things. So one is what you highlight the fact that one possible answer to the question that was originally brought in connection with the how could it be that people are killed, are treated like a member of the city after 30 days when it comes to idol worship, but not with respect to taxes, could just have been, well, one is Isurim and one is monetary, 100%. What's interesting is that they didn't do that and indeed found a way to make the two consistent. So that's a fascinating aspect. And once we've made them consistent, so now that also helps us understand that actually maybe the point is that a resident of a place is subject to charity to help feed the poor and the box. And so the point is that we do in fact have multiple levels of responsibility that people have when they come to join a city. So you're absolutely right to raise it, and it's an important point that we specifically didn't choose that method to answer the question. So
one other thing to note is these are not optional contributions. We have an idea that is taken from a distorted view of Christianity that charity is voluntary. It is definitely not voluntary in the Jewish
correct.
system. And Rambam,
we're going to get to.
Go ahead.
We're going to get to an example of that very, very shortly. So
okay, I'll hold off then.
Yeah. So Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Lepasei Ha'ir, everything, everybody has to pay for the boards of the city, even the orphans, because again, those are for protection. Aval Rabbanan Lo, the Rabbanan Lo Tzrichen Itirusa, but the rabbis don't have to because the rabbis are not necessary, don't require protection. So Amar Rav Papa Lashura Ufarsha Tarzena. So what about a shura is the wall, a parsha, Rashi explains is the horseman who goes around and looks to see what needs to happen in the city and to provide some protection. Tarzena is the person who guards the weapons. Afilu miyatme, again, even orphans need to pay for that. Aval rabbanan lo tzrichen itiruta, but again, the rabbis don't require protection. Klala de milsa, kol milsa de islahu hanamine, anything that you get a benefit from, afilu miyatme, even from orphans. And similarly, even from the rabbis, but the rabbis don't require protection, so as a result, they don't need protection. They don't need to pay for those taxes. Rabba Rama Tzedakah Ayatme Debe Bar Marion. So again, Rabba now required the orphans from the house of Bar Marion to pay a charity tax. Amrle Abaye said, Vahatani Rav Yishmuel Bar Yehuda, Ain Poskin Tzedakah Al Yisomim. We don't impose charity on orphans. Afilu Lefidyon Shvuim, even when it comes to redeeming captives. So Amrle, Ana La'achshuvinhu Ka'avidna. I'm actually doing it for their benefit to make them more important, to highlight how important their family is. And so as a result, this is in fact considered for their benefit and not a tax that only causes them to lose. Ifra Hurmaz, and now that we quoted this statement of Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda that we don't impose charity even for redeeming captives, we're going to now use that statement to in the following discussion. So Ifra Hormiz, the mother of King Shapur, we saw King Shapur was the king of Persia at some point. This is as we saw in Rashi a couple of days ago, about a week ago. Shadra Arnica Didirne sent a chest or a pouch full of gold dinar coins. Lekamei de Rav Yosef, to Rav Yosef. Amra, and she said, Lehevi le mitzvah rabba, use it for a great mitzvah. Yosef Rav Yosef, the Komayanba. So he was trying to figure out my mitzvah rabba. What is considered a great mitzvah? Amra le Abaye, Meditani Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Hey, listen to Rav Yishmuel Bar Yehuda's teaching, because Ein Poskin Tzedakah Al Yisomim Afilu Lepidyon Shvuim. That even for Pidyon Shvuim, Shma Mina, what does that show? Pidyon Shvuim, as we turn to Cherem Bet, Mitzvah Rabbahi. It must be a great mitzvah. So Amrle Rava Larabba. Okay, so we've now shown that it's a great mitzvah. So Amrle Rava Larabba Barmari. So Mina Ha Milsa de Amar Rabbanan de Pidyon Shvuim Mitzvah Rabbahi. Give me some sources for how we know that again this same concept of Pidyon Shvum, redeeming captives, is a great mitzvah. Amrle Diksiv Vahayaki Yomru Elecha Anan Neitzei. And it'll be when they say to you, this is a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, they say to you, to where shall we depart? Amarta aleihem ko amar Hashem asher lamaves asher lecherev asher larav asher l'shevi that those who are going to die are going to die, and those by sword, those by hunger, and those by captivity. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan kol hama'uker b'pasuk zeh kasher mechaveiro. Each one of these is more machmer than the next. Cherev kasher memaves. A sword is more difficult than just plain death from natural causes. Because you can cite a verse to prove it. Or you can use logic. If you want to use logic, high kaminavel, bahai low kaminavel, because one disfigures you and one does not. If you want to cite a pasuk, yakar be'inei Hashem hamavsa l'chasidav, that honorable in the eyes of God is the death of God's pious ones. Of course, the pious ones are not supposed to be killed by sword, and so as a result, that's the natural death. So natural death is better than by sword. Rav kasha mecherev, hunger is worse than a sword. Svara, because one causes a long-term pain. And the other one does not. Or you could cite a pasuk. Tovim hayucha lecherev mechale rav. More fortunate were those, the victims, this is from Eicha, more fortunate are the victims of the sword than the victims of famine, because famine requires you to suffer more. Shavi kashem kulam, and captivity is the hardest of all. Dekulu isnuhube. All of them, all of the other aspects are subject to them. You could end up dying by the sword. You can end up dying by hunger. You could die by regular causes. All of those can happen if you're in captive. Tanu Rabbanim. So now we go back and we talk about the rules of administering charity. So kupa shel tzedakah nigbis b'shnayim, that when you collect charity for the kupa, meaning that you're doing cash, you need to collect with two, mitchaleket b'shlosha. But when you distribute with three.
So somebody doesn't steal it.
You collect with two people. She'ein osin suraros al hatzibor pachos b'shnayim, because we don't put responsibility on, we don't establish authority over people unless you have two people there. Mitchalekes b'shlosha, and you divide with three. B'dinei mamonos, because it's a monetary law. So basically, it's like a court case. Now, Tozos here asks a very logical question. Well, why isn't collecting it like a court case that we should judgment of a monetary manner? And Tozos answers that it must be that we're talking about where there was a fixed amount that everybody needed to pay. And so as a result, there was no judgment of the amount. It was only effectively enforcement. So
they're concerned that someone would, if it was one person, he would steal it, that there's no one to be shomer alav?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're going to touch on exactly that concept in just a moment. When it comes to the food that's collected, though, we are going to collect with three people and divide with three people. Why do both? Because they are equal, meaning that we do them at the same time, Rashi explains, and we don't want to cause the people who are doing the collecting to have to worry about finding a third person. So we make sure that they have the third person right away, so that way they can do immediate collection and immediate distribution. Tamchoy b'chol yom, because the collection of the tamchoy is every day. Kupa, with the cash money that's handed out, me Erev Shabbos l'Erev Shabbos, that's done on Fridays. Tamchoy la'aniyei olam, the food is given to anybody who's poor. Kupa la'aniyei ir, but the charity, the funds, are actually only given to those who are in the city. V'rasha'im b'nei ha'ir la'asos kupay tamchoy, the tamchoy kupa, and the officials of a city are allowed to move money between these two charity purposes. V'lanashoso l'kol masha yirtzu. And if they have extra, they can divert it to any other purpose. And we'll come back to that at the end of today. V'rishoyin b'nei ha'ir lahasnos al hamidos. And they're also allowed to set up laws al hash'arim regarding prices, regarding market prices, val schar po'alim, and on workers' rights and workers' wages, meaning they could set a minimum wage, will hasiya al kitzasam, and you can fine those, and they're allowed to fine those who violate those rules. And we're going to begin, God willing, tomorrow with that concept. So Amar Mar, ein ozen sraros al hatzibor pachos mishnayim. So we said you can't do it with less than 2 people. Minahani mili, how do I know that? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, V'heim yichues hazahav. This pasuk in Shmot, Parakav Chet, is they will take the gold. So as a result, they involves at least 2 people. Sroros hu delo avde. And it's authority that we don't make in one person. Hayemune meheman. But if the person was really, if it was all a question of trust, we would in fact potentially trust one person. And Misayel Rabbi Chanina, a proof of this concept to Rabbi Chanina is the Amar Rabbi Chanina is found in Rabbi Chanina's statement, which was Masa Umina Rebbe Shnei Achen Alakupa. Rebbe once appointed 2 brothers to supervise the charity fund, meaning as long as you had 2 people, that was sufficient, even if they were brothers, and therefore would not necessarily provide any security with respect to lying. Now, we're going to see that nonetheless, notwithstanding the fact that we're seeing that trust is not the key element, trust is still an elephant. Because we're going to see that in a moment. So Maisra Rusa, what do we mean by authority, or how does collecting these charity involve authority? And this gets to Charlie's point. Damar of Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, Lefisha Mashmashkinan, Alat Tzedakah, because you're allowed to seize pledges for unpaid charity contributions. Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos, and you can even do so on Erev Shabbos. 1 second, Aini, is that true? Va'aksiv ufakadti al kol l'chotzav, that I'm going to visit evil on those who oppress, and oppressing is when you try to collect a debt. Va'amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marsa mishmei derav va'afilu al gabay tzedakah, that this applies even to charity collectors. So how can you say that they can seize a pledge? We see that you're not allowed to, charity collectors are subject to punishment if they do that. Lo kasha, had to amid, had to lo amid. Where you assess the person and determine that they're capable of making the payment, well, then there's not going to be any penalty for seizing their pledge. But when you don't make an assessment and you don't evaluate that they're able to do it, so then you wouldn't, then that would be prohibited. Ki hada Rava, as Rava did. Rav Nasan bar Ami, he forced Rav Nasan bar Ami v'shakol minei arba mea zuze l'tzedakah. He forced Rav Ami to give. He forced Rav Nasan, to give Rav Nasan bar Ami to give 400 zuz to charity. Now Tosos here asks the question: how can we force him to do this at all? We have a principle that we're going to learn in Chulin, that any mitzvahs aseh that has a reward written in the Torah next to it, Beis Din is not going to enforce it. So 4 different answers are given by Tosos. Sorry, I haven't scrolled, so let me scroll a little bit. So 4 different answers are given by Tosos. So we'll go through them outside. Rabbeinu Tam says that maybe the forcing was just through words, or alternatively, the community had accepted being forced, and therefore that was why that particular place he was allowed to do the forcing. The Re suggests that actually forcing to give tzedakah is permitted because there's also a negative commandment associated with it, which is prohibiting the not giving of tzedakah. And the Ritzbah suggests that actually when we say that Beit Din does not have authority, it means that Beit Din will not be punished for failing to do it, but it's not an absolute prohibition. Okay, so that's the interesting concept of whether or not one can be forced to give tzedakah, which, as Charlie noted, is something that the rabbis have occasionally done. So
Rav Natan, wouldn't Rav Natan be exempt since he's a Rav?
No, so again, that's you're exempt from protection, but you're not exempt from charity. That it's a different. You're exempt from general taxes that have no specific purpose, but you're not exempt from charity. That we've never seen. We haven't seen that particular point. Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, so Rambam postings that if you if you say that you're not going to contribute to these charity funds, that Beit Din flogs you and confiscates your property.
Yep, yep. There you go. So,
and there's a parallel discussion in the Yerushalmi that is very similar to this, except they actually name the Amoraim that are holding each of these opinions.
Okay, so now we're going to highlight the virtues of charity collectors. So let's take a look. V'hamaskilim yazhiru kizor harakia. Right, the wise will shine. This is a pasuk in Daniel. Will shine like the radiance of the firmament. So what is this? Zed dayan shedan din emes lamito. This is somebody who judges a good, truthful judgment. Umatzdike harabim kechochavim lo'olam va'ed. And those who make the many righteous are going to be like the stars forever and ever. Elu gabet tzedakah. Those are the people who collect charity because they make people righteous by allowing them to give tzedakah. B'masnisa tana, and in a brisa we taught hamaskilim yazhiru b'zoar harakia, that the wise will shine. Who does that refer to? Zed dayan shedan din emes lamito v'gabei tzedakah. That refers both to people who run under good judgments and to charity collectors. Umatzdike harabim kekochavim la'olam va'ed. Who are the people who make many righteous? That's elu milamde tinokos. Those are people who teach children. Kagon man, what's an example of that? Amarav, Kagon Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas. Like Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas, he was a very dedicated teacher. The Rav Ashkachel Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas, because Rav once found Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas, the Havukai Beginsa. He was in his garden. Amrle Shvakte Lehem Nusach. Once again, have you abandoned those who are trusting you? Meaning, have you left the children alone? Amrle Hat Laser Shnin Lo Chazyali. It's been 13 years since I've been in this garden. And even now, I'm thinking about the children. So the point is that's how dedicated. He didn't take a vacation for 13 years. V'Rabbanan Mai, and what about the rabbis? What reward did they get? Amaravina v'Ohavav Kitzetz Hashemesh Bigvuraso. That when it says in Shoftim that those who love God will shine, will be like the sun in its strength. So Tanarabanan, another now two brisas that support the concept that with additional rules that apply to charity collectors. So let's take a look. So Tanarabanan, Gabait Tzedakah Ein Rishon Lifrosh Zemizet, that when you have two charity collectors, they can't separate from one another because we're worried that, as Rashi explains, that we're worried that people will think that if you're collecting by yourself, it means that you're stealing. Now, this could be a post facto analysis, meaning we have to have two in order to impose authority. Because we don't allow one person to have the authority to just take something from someone. But once we've established two, if there's one by himself, we're worried that people will think that that person is engaged in stealing. But they can split, and Rashi explains, as long as they can be seen at the same time. So as long as if the two of them are going door to door, and one goes to one house and another goes to another house, as long as they can be seen from one to the other, then people will understand that they're not actually going individually. Matzah Mos B'Shuk. What happens if they find money in the marketplace? Lo Yanem B'Tokiso. Don't put it in their own pocket. They need to put it in the charity fund purse because we don't want people to think that they're taking charity money and putting it in their own pocket. But then when he gets his home, then he can take it out because then he'll be in private. Similarly, if somebody was owed $100 and he's the charity collector and he gets paid in the marketplace, don't put it in his own pocket. Ella no put it in the charity chest because and then when he gets home, he can take it out. Similarly, second brisa, Tan Rabban, Gabay Tzedakah she'ein lahem aniyim l'chalik. If they don't have any poor people to give to, Portin la'acherim. They should do money exchange because they're going to have copper coins that can spoil. So they're going to do money exchange with other people. The ain portin la'atzman. They shouldn't do it for themselves because we're worried that they're going to give themselves a more favorable exchange rate. Gabai tamchui she'ein lahem aniyim l'chalik. And if they have food, if they're the food distributors, they shouldn't again mokrin la'acherim. They should sell the food to other people. The ain mokrin la'atzman, but not sell it to themselves. And similarly, you don't count the money of charity two at a time because people will see that, not know and not hear you counting, and will think that you counted one, but you took two so that you could manipulate things after the fact. You have to count one by one. So last statement. Amar Abaye, Miresh lo havi Yosef Mar atzipe debe kanishta. Originally, my teacher, Rabbah, would not sit on mats belonging to a shul. Why? Because they may have been bought using charity money, and Rabbah didn't want to use charity money for himself. Kavan Dishma Lahad Tanya, but once he heard the brisa, Ulashanosa Lachol Masha Yirtzu, that they can change the purpose for any purpose they need, Havi Yosef, then he realized that he could sit. Amar Abaye, a similar statement by Abaye, Miresh Hava Abid Bar Trey Kise. Originally, my teacher Rabbah would have two different purses that he would keep track of for donations. Chadla Aniye to Alma, Chadla Aniye to Masa. One for the poor of the city of the world, and one for the poor of this particular city. Kavan the Shma Lahada Amar Le Shmuel Rav Tachlifa Bar Abdimi. But once he heard Shmuel say to Rav Tachalifa Bar Abdimi, so then he was made one. He was okay having one purse. As we turn to Tedam and Aleph, v'asni Allah, and he just made a condition. Inami Avid Chad Kisa v'asni Allah. The point is that he had said that you can make a condition, and if you make the condition, so Rabbah made the condition. Rav Ashi Amar Ana Asnuyi Nami Lo Tzrichna. I don't even need a condition. Dika Asay, because anybody who comes to me, Adaita de Diase, knows that they're coming to my discretion. And I can give to whomever I want. And so tomorrow, God willing, we're not quite done with our charity collectors, but we're going to pause for a moment because we said that communities could establish rules for business and punish those who violate the rules. So the Gemara is going to give a brief aside to address one such incident. But for that story, stay tuned for tomorrow.
I think they don't mention it here, but I think we say that Ircha Kodem, right? Ani Ircha Kodem.
Yes, absolutely. In general, there's the concept of Ircha Kodem, correct. But the point is that we now allow people to, if people want to, they can obviously give to, they can give extra. Ircha Kodem is sort of a priority, but it's not a strict rule when it comes to voluntary gifts. Well, God willing, tomorrow, right? Tomorrow is July 4th. We're going to start at 7:30 so that we have enough time to do the daf. Same, everything in person, etc. So we're going to start a few minutes early because davening tomorrow is at 8:30. So we'll be learning before davening.
So where
okay, same place, same bad time. Well, not same time, but 15 minutes earlier, God willing, tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you all then.
So you're going to get food for your